This is Out of the Past with Chuck Langdon and Lee Shepard, an in-depth discussion with some of the most fascinating people of our time, many of them with strong area connections. Now, today's Out of the Past.
Hello and welcome to Out of the Past. I'm Chuck Langdon with my co-host Lee Shepard. Lee, who's our guest?
Thank you, Chuck. Well, our guest today is a man who, like many of the very successful people in the television business these days, began their careers in the training program at WTOP-TV Channel 9. Our guest today worked his way up from the training program to producer-director, directing and producing many of the most important shows in local television and also syndicated shows, working with people like Martin Negronsky, Charles Crawford, Carl Rowan, Max Robinson. Steve King, welcome to Out of the Past.
Well, thank you. Good to be here.
Tell us about Martin Negronsky. What's it like working with him?
Martin Negronsky had a big ego because he came from the networks. He had worked at CBS, NBC, household name. I think he was also on Meet the Press. So when he came to Channel 9, Julian Barber was the anchorman at that time. Now, they were going to do a show called Martin Negronsky's Washington, and they wanted Julian Barber, who everybody who's watching this show knows the name Julian Barber. They said, Julian, you're going to have to share space here with Negronsky. He's a star, and you're going to have the dual anchor spots. It didn't go over very well with Julian. So Negronsky came to work at 9, and Negronsky was the kind of a guy that if you wrote anything on the script or the teleprompter, he would read it. And when they had dual anchors, he not only read his script, he read Julian's script too. So he didn't give anybody a chance because you put it in front of Negronsky, he was going to read it. But he was an interesting guy and a little pomposity there, but he knew the movers and shakers of Washington.
How did you get interested in broadcasting?
Well, I knew when I was 12 years old that I wanted to be a broadcaster. I wanted to be a disc jockey. And people that were on the air here in Washington, and the chap just passed away last year, Don Dillard, WDON, or WWDC. These are the people we listened to when we were teenagers going around the hot shop in our cars, just like you see in the movie American Graffiti. This was the disc jockeys that we listened to. And I thought, this is what I want to do. So I saved up the money and bought a little reel-to-reel tape recorder, and there I am doing the Steve King Show. And I did all these kinds of things, and I even knew when I went on to junior high and high school, I said, I know that I want to be a broadcaster. This is what I want to do. And of course, your parents and your teachers say, no, you want to be an accountant, don't you? No, I want to be a broadcaster. I think this is what I want to do. So I ended up going to the National Academy of Broadcasting in Washington, D.C. At that time, it was one of the few in the country that trained potential broadcasters, and we had instructors that were in the business. People like Charlie Stopak, who was a director here in Washington, D.C. at Channel 7. He was our television director. Val Thomas, I don't know if you remember that name. He was on, I think, WGMS. He did all the classical shows.
Oh, yes.
He was one of our instructors, a guy named Al Johnson from The Voice of America, and on and on and on. So we had professional teachers that were in the business teaching these aspiring broadcasters for the potential future. And what they couldn't give you was a deep voice. That you had to try and fake. But they'd give you the techniques.
What year did you come to TOP?
I started at TOP in 1966, and it could have been in March of '66 because I remember that it happened to be the same year that Walt Disney passed away. When I was in the training program, which started out basically as a job between jobs, I said, well, I'll take this. In the meantime, when I find a real job in broadcasting, get back on the air, I'll take this thing. It paid $65 a week. Now I'm the only guy back in 1966 who's driving a Corvette and making $65 a week. Go figure that out. Of course, I was living with my parents at the time, so that kind of helps. I could make the car payments back in those days.
Only in radio and TV.
Only in radio and TV.
You started in radio. Why didn't you go back to radio?
I don't think anybody wanted me. You know, I thought I was ready for the big time. That's another reason why I came to TOP, because I thought I walked into the, as they call it, broadcast house, and I think I ran into Lee Shepard and John Douglas, who was the weatherman there. And I said, you know, I've had on-air experience. I'd like to come see if you guys need, you know, an announcer. And they said, how many years have you been doing this? I said, well, I've been doing this 2 years. I'm ready for the big time.
And where were you?
I was in Warrenton, Virginia, at WEER, on a little 500-watt AM station that the signal got out to the driveway. Yeah, and we had about 2 listeners and a cow. So I said, you know, I think I want to be a broadcaster. I want to say Television 9, you know. I can say that. Or, you know, if Tony Sylvester, who was doing the 11 o'clock news, if he can't do it, we can step in front of there and do that, because you think you can do it. You know, you're 23 years old. You think you can do anything, you know. So I think it was Douglas and Lee said, well, I think you don't have the experience. They were being very nice. You know, you need 10 years experience. This is a top 10 market. But we do have a training program. Why don't you go talk to a guy named Woody Robertson? And you guys had Woody on the show.
Yes.
And Woody looked at me, and of course I had my suit on, you know, I'm dressed toward the big position. And then he waltzes me around to meet Jim Silman, who was a cool guy.
Oh, yeah.
He had the monogram shirt, you know, and the mustache, and a very cool looking guy. And for some reason, they hired me. And I thought, well, gets my foot in the door.
What show did you start on Channel 9?
We started out by, of course, sweeping the floors. And what's interesting is, you know, when you, being an ex-broadcaster, I came to work first day in a suit and tie. You know, this is a broadcasting position. Well, when you're moving sets around and you're sweeping the floors, you don't want to be in a suit and tie. So the next day you're dressed, you know, like a normal, because you're really not who you think you are, you know. So you're moving sets for things like Ranger Hal. Play School 9 was one of the shows we used to do. We did a wonderful show called Mass for Shut-Ins. So you name it, we did it. But the Ranger Hal show was the one where you learned the biz.
Well, good morning, good morning, good morning. How are you?
Barry Levinson, though, started out on a news show, and then he got fired the first day by Duke Struck. Do you remember Duke Struck?
I remember Duke Struck very well. Working with Duke Struck was an experience. As a matter of fact, Duke Struck was a speaker at this Broadcasting Academy, and he came. They invited him to talk to the potential graduates, and he came in and said, all you people in this room are never going to make it. And of course the director of the Broadcasting Academy wanted to drop dead. He goes, you people are not going to make it. You know, this is a hard business. You go find a job, you know, driving a truck or something, you know. But working for Struck at Channel 9 was a very unique experience. Very talented guy, but he ruled with an iron fist. He was physically a big guy. I think he was probably 6'3", something, 6'4".
Yeah, I remember.
Physically he was big, and verbally he was big, and he could make you feel that big. And you were terrified, but you were sharp. You took this job very seriously, because Struck could do one of two things. He could have you fired, or he could have you killed.
Now, Barry Levinson didn't treat him very nicely in his book, 66. Now, you were with us. You helped us film that remote with Barry Levinson. Duke actually threw him off the news program and put him down a step to the Ranger Hal show, which actually was a step up for Barry, at least according to Barry, because that's where he kind of honed his skills and learned some of these techniques and so forth that he later used as a very, very successful movie mogul. When did you become a director?
Well, I never became a full director. I was an assistant director. Because if I said I became a full director, Duke Struck would be coming in now and say, hey, listen, you were not a full director. You were an assistant director. There's a big difference. The assistant directors carried the stopwatches, wrote down the in cues, out cues, the times of the news pieces. I did get to direct some videos, and one of which was an interview with a Gronsky and an actor who just died recently, a guy named Tony Curtis. And he came into the studio, and I was assigned by our program manager at that time, production manager. King, I want you to go direct this interview with the Gronsky. I didn't know who it was going to be, and then I come down to the control room, and it's Tony Curtis. Drop-dead handsome guy, and you know, I'm heterosexual, but this guy was drop-dead handsome. Curtis was there for an I Quit Smoking campaign. He was there berating Gronsky and chiding him about Gronsky. He says, you know, I still smoke cigarettes, and I don't stop.
Martin, I'd like to see you quit. I admire you. I've enjoyed watching you on television, and I think it would be a damn silly thing for you to continue smoking. That's the end of my...
The thing that makes this unique is in 1970s, when this was done, Curtis leaves the studio. He goes to work in London on a show called The Persuaders. But when he gets to Gatwick Airport, I guess it was, he gets busted for having marijuana in his suitcase. So that was the end of the I Quit Smoking campaign.
Let's talk about these other films you have. These are very unique, and I think people who remember the 60s very well will recognize many of these people.
You know, they didn't let me direct a lot of stuff. Anytime I would have the opportunity to do something, I would call down to the tape room and say, can you give me a copy of this thing? But one of the times when I was in AD, we were doing a show called The Big News. And this was when a guy named Martin Clancy was the producer. He ended up being Barbara Walters' producer in New York at ABC. So they had these two guys, a guy named Tom Braden and Frank Mankiewicz. And they used to come in and do a bit where they would do a little political commentary. And they said, you know, these guys are good. Maybe we should give them their own show. So they gave them a show called The Big News. Came on at 11 o'clock. And they would do political news. And they had David French, who you also had on the program. Yes. David was the real newsman. He was the guy standing at the lectern, and he would give the hard news. And Braden Mankiewicz would give the political kind of news. And at that time, Charlie Gertz was the weatherman. Two great stories about Gertz. One was Charlie Gertz was not very good at predicting the weather, even though he was a meteorologist. At one time, Gertz had predicted that Hurricane Gerda was going to come through Washington and level the city. So everybody should close their stores, schools should be closed, be careful. Hurricane Gerda is coming to Washington. Of course, Hurricane Gerda bypassed Washington, and I remember David French taking the carbon paper from the prompter paper and putting it over Gertz's office and called it Gerda Gertz, rest in peace, because it never happened. But then when Gertz also predicted a snowstorm for Washington, and it didn't snow, it just rained. No, excuse me, it did snow. I think I have this story back. He predicted rain and it came to snow. Now we have this right. You know, when you get to be my age.
Well, I understand.
Tom Braden and Frank Mankiewicz saying, Charlie Gertz, what is this? And they're throwing snowballs, and he's dodging them on the weather set.
And now with the full-scale formal weather prediction, here is Charlie Gertz, who said earlier this evening that the snow would turn to rain. Charlie, just what is this stuff anyway?
Well, I gotta say that I had it coming. Feel a lot better about the whole situation now, really. Let's give you a little detailed explanation on this. Gee, look at this. That's terrible snowing all over the map. But you see some of it running down as rain, and this is what's likely to happen in Washington.
The other tape I'm talking about is the Art Buchwald stuff.
I had a video production company in Bethesda, Maryland. At that time in '77, there was only about 10 companies doing this thing. And now there's, well, in their heyday, they've got up to about 300. And now in the recession, there's probably back down to 10 again. So I get this call one time, and they said, can you transfer film to videotape? And I happen to have this box that did that. I said, bring it on up. So they bring it up, they drop it off, and I start transferring this film onto, in those days, it was 3/4 inch. We've been through so many formats. So I'm looking at this film, and it's Art Buchwald. And Art Buchwald, every Easter, would give a party in front of his house. And what I didn't know was, until watching the film, these were films from 1966 to 1974. Every year, they would handhold home movies of Buchwald's Easter party in front of his home. He'd put on an Easter bunny outfit with the ears, and he had those big black rim eyeglasses and a megaphone, and all the kids are out front in the rides. But the people who came to this party every year with the heavy hitters of Washington. People like David Brinkley, Everett Bennett Williams, Ben Bradley, Jack Valenti, Sandra Van Oker, Bobby and Ethel Kennedy came to these events. Remember Evans and Novak, Roland Evans and Robert Novak? They were there. Kirk Douglas, Ben Gazzara. So all these people are on this film. And I'm thinking, you know, this is a pretty interesting film. I think I'm going to keep a copy for myself, which I did. Many years later, I'm reading in the Post that Art Buchwald has got diabetes, and he's on dialysis, and they've amputated a leg, and he wants to die. He doesn't want to go on dialysis anymore. He's going to go to a hospice and die. So I thought, you know, and Lee Shepard will tell you, I'm one of these guys that never throws anything away, so if you want to pull a video out from 1976 or whatever, I've got it. Don't ask why. So I pulled this thing out. It was still on 3/4 inch. I transferred over to DVD, and I call up the Washington Post, and I say, you know, I've got this DVD of Art Buchwald, and maybe he'd like to see it. And he had all these parties, and I said, even Ben Bradley's on this tape, DVD. And of course, the woman on the other end of the phone says, well, who's Art Buchwald? And they're working at the Washington Post. So to make a long story short, they say, call back tomorrow. I call back tomorrow, and I start telling them the same story. And I say, you know, even Ben Bradley's on this video. They say, well, we'll connect you to Mr. Bradley's office. Ring, ring, ring. Voice goes, hello? I said, this sounds like Ben Bradley. He says, it is. I said, well, I'm Stephen King. I'm not the author. I told him the whole story about the DVD and Art Buchwald. He says, bring it down to me. Bring it down to him. He says, I'll get this to Artie. He's in the hospice. He takes the thing to Buchwald. About 4 or 5 days go by. I'm standing in line at a bank, and my cell phone goes off. I pick it up. Mr. King, this is Art Buchwald. That's exactly how he talked. You know, he had kind of a lisp. He says, you know, that video of the home movies is the best thing I got here at the hospice. Can you bring me some more? He says, I'm being awarded to the French Legion of Merit, and he wanted to hand them out to his friends. So he says, I'll pay you for it. I said, well, no charge. I mean, you're not going to charge a dying person, you know, for a DVD. And besides, he was kind of an icon. This was a kick for me. I take the DVDs down to Buchwald. She's down there with his daughter, his son and his daughter-in-law and his grandchildren. And they say, Mr. King, stay with my father. We have to leave. Now, I'm there with Art Buchwald, one-on-one. This is like Maury and me, you know, on Tuesday. And Buchwald is, you know, a personable guy, but he doesn't know me. It's kind of awkward. What are you going to say to this guy? Yeah. So I said to him, well, maybe after watching this video, you'll go on the dialysis. No, he says, no, I still want to do it. So this ended up being in a eulogy that George Stevens Jr. did for him after he died. And it was also in Buchwald's book, because he got the eulogies before he died. He wanted to see what people were going to say about him. And the eulogies were from Mike, strange guy. But he had you know, people like Mike Wallace and Brokaw. And George Stevens says in his eulogy down at the Kennedy Center, well, Buchwald, while he's in the hospice, one of his old friends brought him home movies. All of a sudden, I'm his old friend. Buchwald wouldn't have recognized me in a lineup. So that's my Buchwald story. If they're showing that, you'll see the heavy hitters on here that Washington known names.
Julian Barber, you started a story about Julian. He was quite a character, wasn't he?
Julian was a neat guy, and he was just like you see the anchorman, stereotypical anchorman that you see like Ted Baxter. He was a funny guy, off camera. He would tell stories about when he was, I think he was in North Carolina, same station you were in, and Julian would tell the story. He said, you know, I'm an anchorman here now in Washington. He says, but there was a day when I'm working for peanuts, basically. He didn't say peanuts, but I'm working for very low wages down in North Carolina. He says, I'd have just enough money at the end of the week to buy a bag of popcorn and a Coca-Cola. And that was his dinner on a Friday night, because he'd used all the other money for the rent. And I could identify with that, because that happened to me in Warrenton, Virginia. Now, we didn't have popcorn and a Coke for dinner. We had the Frost Diner down there. But you know, I was getting my paycheck cashed on the bus, on the way home.
I want to ask one about a gentleman that I worked with in the radio side, and that was Eddie Gallagher.
Eddie was a unique guy. He, golden voice. He's the guy that replaced Arthur Godfrey. When Godfrey came to, left TOP and went to the network, Eddie Gallagher replaced him. And he had this thing called the Moon Dial. Remember that, Lee?
Yes.
And he was a Washington fixture. He did the show business, kind of the Entertainment Tonight stuff before that was ever done. But he was a funny guy. He would say to you, you know, it's too bad you were never anything, otherwise you'd have a heck of a career behind you. That was typical Eddie Gallagher.
Some other unique people there that you worked with.
John Douglas, he's a guy that I still like to find today. I'm kind of like Ralph Edwards, This Is Your Life. I find people that from my past, and I'll call them up or email them and find them on Google. For instance, Tony Sylvester used to do the 11 o'clock news. Tracked him down. He's down in North Carolina. He left TOP and went to work at WAVY in the Hamptons down there somewhere in Virginia. A guy that I like to find, and if anybody knows where he is, last time we heard he was in Maine, if he's still alive, John Douglas. He did the weather. His real name was John Wilkinson, as you remember. Right? And John was a funny guy. He always thought he was going to be fired every day. So he'd call into the switchboard and say, "Is John Douglas there?" And she'd say, "Well, he's here, but and that way he would know he was still working there." That's how insecure he was.
And didn't John put those sticky clouds on the wall?
Oh, I was about the weather maps.
Yeah.
Back in those days, before there was no green screens. It was all done with smoke and mirrors, basically. How they do the numbers for the temperatures of the different cities. Back in those days, it was black and white television, and they had makeup sticks that you put it on your face, and then you put the powder on over top of the stick. They would use those sticks. I remember the sticks were beige in color, and they would write on the weather map, 41 degrees, 25 degrees in Chicago, with the makeup stick.
But they put the makeup on because it was black and white.
That's correct, for the beers and stuff.
But they needed the contrast too, didn't they?
They needed the contrast.
The shading.
That's correct, to hide the beards and the shading. But they used those sticks to put up on the weather map the temperatures. Now the lowly guys, we big floor directors, it was our job that after the weather forecast, we had to go with the paper towel. They actually had paper towels in those days, and wipe off the temperatures, off the map. So we had a clean map every day.
The art department made little clouds with tape on the back.
And they would stick them on. As a matter of fact, there's a funny story about that. Jim Silman was the program director, and he was an inventive guy, a very creative guy. And as a matter of fact, I think he designed that set back in the day where you would introduce the weatherman, and this huge sliding door would open up and reveal the weatherman. And Lee did that on the 11 o'clock news. And the director was Laird Simon. So Laird told me, and I used to AD for Laird, one camera would point at Lee's feet, the other camera would have the wide shot. When Lee's feet went to turn, Laird knew that's the time you opened up the door to reveal the weatherman.
So that wouldn't be on TV. That
No,
would be
not your feet.
Yeah.
Today it would be Dancing with the Stars. But back then, that showed Laird you're ready to make your turn, so he could anticipate, because he didn't know when you're going to turn to do the weather. You didn't say, "Now let's look at the weather in your area," like they do today.
I always wondered how he knew.
He had your feet. Silman was a very creative guy. I think he helped design the set. They had he purchased this weather map that these triangular tubes that turned from the national map to the local map to, I guess, just the forecast. And the company that sold it to them, it was neat in its day. The triangular tubes each had 3 sides, so they would put the clouds, like you said, and the weather up on these little magnetic things. But when the thing turned, they would fall. Show business.
What was it like in the studio or at WTOP before all this new technology?
When I came to work at TOP in '66, they had black and white cameras. These were these big box cameras with the turrets, so it had 3 lenses, I think, wide, medium, and close-up. And they were these big, I think they were made by RCA, I don't remember. And of course they had the thing on the side, very impressive, WTOP-TV, and even before I got there, they used to say CBS on the side, so you're in the big time, But these cameras, there was no zooming in like you do today, and I remember when they didn't work well, the engineers would bang on the side of the cameras to make them come back to life. Now, speaking of banging on the side of the camera, I used to have to run the teleprompter. The teleprompter sat on top of these cameras. We had an anchorman named Don Allen, God rest his soul. Well, he did the 11 o'clock news on Sundays, and Laird Simons was the director. And Don Allen had all this on prompter, and a lot of news. He tried to get in. There's a 15-minute newscast. He tried to get in a lot. Well, the prompter's on top of the camera, and I'm running the prompter, and the thing jams.
It's roll of paper.
It's roll of paper. Yeah, it's not like today with a computer. This is actually real paper on sprocket holes going, And the prompter stops. Now, Don Allen is giving me this look like, this is the end of the world. He had a lot, and he wants to keep eye contact with the camera. So I'm going to help him out. I started banging on the prompter to make it work, and the picture on the screen's going like this. It looks like Don Allen's on a ship. And Laird Simons is hollering, "What are you doing? What are you doing?" We got the prompter to work, and on we went.
Okay.
You've been away from Channel 9 for many, many years, and of course, your business, mobile video productions, is very successful. But do you miss DOP? Did you miss it when you left?
Yes. The broadcasting bug, once you have it for life. It's there. And what I had liked to have fulfilled my dream as a 12-year-old all the way up. What I have liked to ended up like Lee Shepard and these guys on the air, you bet. It was fun. It was a little pseudo-glamorous. It was, you're not making number 2 pencils at a factory. If anybody out there is making number 2 pencils, I'm sorry. But it was a little show business.
But wasn't it difficult to kind of go up through the chain to get to a higher level because there were such few opportunities? It narrowed down very quickly, for talent particularly, to move from smaller stations up through Washington, then Philadelphia, then New York.
To be talented at TOP, as I said, you had to have plenty of experience. And back in those days, if you think I look young now, and I'm an old guy, I looked super young. I mean, the police used to pull me over saying, "You're not old enough to drive a car." So when in your own mind, you think, well, I can go on camera. But if you look like a kid, they don't want a kid, no experience, presenting the news or whatever it is. So that was reality hits you in the face. You're really not ready for prime time. You're not ready for a top 10 market.
But it was even difficult for the people who were on camera who did have the experience to try to get up. New York was at the top?
Oh yeah, when I was there, Sam Donaldson was working there. Stephen Gear was working there. Of course, David French, Bill Zimmerman, Hal Walker, Charles Crawford. All these guys went on to the networks. And to see them, particularly Sam, because Sam used to walk into the studio, and every day he would do it. I think he did the 1 o'clock news, and every day he'd walk in and say, "Why am I surrounded by incompetence?" That was just Sam's act. He liked doing that. We didn't take it personally. We knew this is Sam Donaldson.
Well, Steve, I'm so happy that we could help make your dream come true.
Finally, this is my on camera. Finally, thank you.